There are many game modes in World of Tanks, each offering something unique and exciting, something different from the well-known random battles. However, I would like to focus on one particular game mode and suggesting changes to it, the Battle Royale of World of Tanks, Steel Hunter. This game mode has received a lot of changes over the years. However, recently, not much happened in regards to new content or balancing. Let's go over the different iterations quickly and see what has changed. 2019. They added the new game mode, Steel Hunter. It had 3 tanks, Red Drawn, Flammerschwert, Rattensnake, and one huge map, Dreamland, and 7 different abilities for the tanks, but the most unique part of Steel Hunter was the upgrade system. You could upgrade your tank in many different ways by collecting experience in battle, which was unheard of before. The upgrades were hulls, turrets, and guns of already existing tanks in the game, and you had many different options to choose from. The spotting system was also very different from random battles too. Instead of spotting tanks in a 360 area, it was a 90-degree cone bound to your turret, which meant that you had to look at the enemy's direction to spot them. Arguably a very difficult game load, especially since the progression was more similar to ranked battles. You lost chevrons if you got a poor placement, however, the rewards made up for it, giving you plenty of bonds and other useful rewards. Let's move on to 2020, where they completely reworked the game mode. They added 2 new tanks and changed the already existing tanks into basically new tanks and added new map called Varyag 4.04. However, they made every ability tank specific and tanks now only had 2 abilities. They also got rid of the level 8 because they reworked the track upgrade at tier 2 and changed the ammunition. Now the standard ammo is heat shell and the gold ammo is APCR, which now does less damage, but it's easier to find. This change was also very annoying since every tank had spaced armor everywhere, so the heat shells often got stuck. 2021 was a mostly uneventful year for the game mode. CC tournaments were held in the game mode, which was pretty exciting. They added replays and spectator mode and some small balance changes, but nothing major. 2022 was again a very interesting year for the game mode, bringing 3 new tanks and one more map, Firnuflir, but I won't talk too much about it. 2023 is when Steel Hunter Reborn was introduced, which was a huge change. First of all, it introduced respawns in the beginning of the game. Secondly, it made the standard shell AP again, which how it was originally. Thirdly, it made the spotting the same as random battles, 360 vision cone, and added bots, but no new tanks, maps, or upgrades got added, which is a trend that will continue, as you will see. 2024 is when they released Steel Hunter Evolution, which kept some of the features of Steel Hunter Reborn, but also made a few changes to it, such as making the vision cone 120 degrees instead of 360 degrees, and adding a cooldown reduction for your abilities when picking up a red drop. This is the version of Steel Hunter that is available on EU and hasn't been changed much since. They also introduced the Shamrock Showdown, which is a slightly modified version of Steel Hunter Evolution to fit the theme of the event, which was also brought back in 2025 as well. In 2025, the only thing they did is add skill-based matchmaking, which was a pretty terrible idea since most people play Steel Hunter for the rewards or to have fun, not to get a competitive experience. Now you might ask, why am I talking so much about this insignificant game mode that nobody really cares about? Good question. It's because, in my opinion, this could be made as a serious game mode, like Onslaught. It's very unique and intense gameplay offers something that no other game mode does. And I think it's the best game mode, wargaming, ever made in World of Tanks. And with these changes, the game mode could become an alternative battle royale and attract more players. Now, what should be changed about this game mode? If we want to make this a permanent game mode, we have to start fixing some issues. My first issue with Steel Hunter is gold ammunition. Right now, gold ammunition is kinda useless. They do less damage than AP shells with higher penetration. However, why would you want to do less damage if you can penetrate tanks with standard ammo? And this is mainly a problem for players that are more skilled. How would I fix it? Well, I have 2 ideas to fix gold ammunition. The first one is to allow players to choose how much of the shells do they want to get as regular shells and how much do they want to get as gold shells. For example, someone chooses 90% standard ammo and 10% gold ammo. That means 90% of the shells that he will collect are going to be standard ammo, and 10% of the shells that he collects from drops is going to be gold ammunition. Now, this doesn't actually fix the problem, but it makes the problem less problematic. It just hides the problem, basically. Now, these changes could eliminate such thing as, for example, running out of standard ammunition, have to resort firing the gold ammo, which will do less damage. However, I have a much better solution that actually fixes the problem. Add APFSDS from Lesta. Yeah, I know we are copying Lesta, but I literally cannot think of a better solution than APFSDS. You might ask, what is APFSDS? What's so unique and good about it? The damage is dependent on not on RNG, but rather on how much the shell travels inside the tank, which means that if the shell travels straight through the tank, like it's a heavy tank, for example, and you just pen it frontally and goes straight through it, it will do a huge damage. But if you hit a cupola, it will do almost no damage, because the cupola, it enters the cupola and then immediately exits the cupola, which is a very small distance, so it does less damage. Now, they will be fast and also have no auto ricochet angles like APs, so they will be useful when the enemies have a lot of armor and also huge. Because then you will have higher penetration and also higher damage because the tank is huge. For example, against a Walküre, you can pen the frontal plate, the upper plate with APFSDS. It will go straight through and do huge damage, even more than AP would. This would also make APFSDS pretty useless against light tanks, sniping cupolas. So, for example, someone is in hold down, like maybe Beowulf is in hold down, and you want to shoot APFSDS. Well, you will just go straight through the turret, which is like 2 meters, so you're not gonna do that much damage, which rewards the Beowulf player for using his armor effectively, so he will take less damage. However, you will still be able to do some damage to it, but it would also reward you for choosing shell types carefully, which is what we want, at least what I want, because right now gold shells are kind of a waste of a game mechanic in Steel Hunter. Wargaming tried to test it, and test the gold shells doing less damage, and I think we can conclude that this test failed. It doesn't really work, even in Steel Hunter. Imagine if they implement this change in the random battles. It's just gonna cause heavy tanks to be even stronger. Yeah, it's not gonna do any good. So this is my solution to gold ammo. Now let's talk about another waste of game mechanic, and that is commanders in Steel Hunter. They are equipped with our pre-selected skills. And let's just say that they are not the best. Now this is on Lesta. I think it's slightly better, but still, like Deadeye, or like what is this called? It's auto-translated, so that's why the name is weird. But you spot enemies for 2 seconds longer with a Walküre. Like, what? Or Intuition. Like, why would you switch to APCR? These tanks have like, okay, not the best penetration. Maybe if you don't upgrade fast enough, you have to fire APCR because you cannot pen the tank otherwise. But like, imagine Intuition on the light tanks. Like, you use the HE gun, you've constantly to switch between these shells. You want a higher damage, lower pen HE, or higher pen, lower damage HE. Like, it just makes much more sense on light tanks. Imagine if you could switch 850 alpha. You see a light tank, and like, oh my god, I'm gonna switch to HE. And you pen him for 850. Imagine that. And like, he starts angling, you cannot pen, because like 45 pen, even a light tank can angle in a way that you cannot pen. So you just load AP and you can pen him easily. You should be able what I suggest is that you should be able to choose 2 perks from every, from commanders, from loaders, from gunner, from radio guy, whatever. You should be able to choose 2 perks for each tank. You can choose whatever you want. Like, for example, on the Bái Láng, I want to choose this, and maybe intuition if I want to use the HE, but this is also a pretty good perk. So, like, Lesta actually tried to, like, put perks on tanks that makes sense, but on EU it has, like, what? Off-road driving on these light tanks. Like, why? They have, like, look at this. 1000 horsepower or 1400 horsepower. Uh, And they weigh like what? 30 to 40 tons at max, or even less. Like, they have insane engines. Like, they don't need off-road driving. Or maybe I would put emergency on Harbinger, because this ability is constantly damaging myself. So the perk will be constantly be active. So I get basically a permanent boost to my tank when this thing is active. So I get even more reload buff. So you can just experiment with different setups, and it will give you more control over how you want to play it. Of course, for the Valkyrie, I would controlled impact and engineer maybe to get just slightly more top speed. So this is my suggestion to fixing commanders in Steel Hunter. Or maybe update the perks, at least if Wargaming doesn't want to implement this. At least update the perks to more reasonable ones, so that they actually make sense. Honestly, they could just copy this. Like, this perk is just so good. You don't know it, but this perk is so good because you can see enemy modules damaged. And this Bái Láng has this acid shot ability, which means that if you see that the enemies have damage modules and suddenly they no longer have damage modules, that means they repaired it, which means that they cannot repair the acid shot. Like, if you had the choice on the EU, you could put this and the enemies would be cooked. And it will reward your game knowledge and skill. So I don't see any problems with this. And let's be honest, most of these perks aren't that influential. Yeah, this perk could be broken on this Bái Láng or Arlequin, because Arlequin also has airstrike, but I don't see that it's gonna break the game. In fact, it's just gonna make the game more fun and interesting. However, compared to later changes, these are just small, minuscule changes that won't really affect the gameplay much. Now, that's out of the way. Let's start with specific tanks and changes to specific tanks. Let's start with Varyag. Now, I don't want to change too much about this tank. However, this is a perfect opportunity for me to add a new mechanic. The British double barrel, or the selective fire mode system, to the double guns. So, basically, now you have to switch modes to instantly double. You switch in 2 seconds, and then you instantly double. However, you get worse dispersion. I imagine the 0.8 dispersion would be good, because like 0.1, like, sorry, 1.15 as the British double barrels have it, it's kinda too much, kinda useless unless you're really close, but 0.8 is still not very accurate so that you can just double all the time. And I would also make the DPM in the double mode better, so your reload doesn't actually go up by 100%, it will only go up by 80% maybe. So you get better DPM when in the double mode, and you also don't get any mobility nerf, because the Varyag is already pretty slow, so like it doesn't really need it. Or maybe make the dynamics engine not give you any mobility nerf, but the top speed engine gives you mobility nerf. So if you choose the dynamics, you don't get any nerf mobility wise if you use the double, but if you use top speed, you get the same nerfs. Top speed, turret traverse, and etc. So it would also give more purpose to dynamics engine, because this dynamics engine is kinda useless. Like, on EU it has 40 top speed and 50 top speed. Like, why would you use the dynamics engine if you could just get more top speed with this? So yeah, this would also make the engine more useful. And of course, it would also make the double guns unique. And of course, they will have no gun handling nerf when in the double mode, so you will always be 0.8 accurate. If we implement this mechanic, you could also put concentration, which improves your base accuracy if you stand still. Maybe, if you want to do that, you will get pretty significant accuracy boosts compared to a crew skill. I would also change the armor, because right now it's not very good. I would buff the turret front, so AP, tier 7 AP cannot pen it. However, I would make the cupola bigger. The turret is no longer an auto pen for AP shells, but if you aim carefully, you can hit the cupola easily. I would also buff the side armor, which was already kind of tricky to pen. However, this will make it even harder to pen. I would also nerf the shovel, so you can pen the lower plate easily. Like, you won't get any random ricochets or bounces. The lower plate should be an auto pen from almost every angle. So this would make the overall armor effectiveness better, but it will still retain the weak spots of the tank. In fact, it will actually be worse in hold down situations because the cupola will be bigger, but it will be better at side scraping positions because then you can use your side effectively. My problem with this hull is that you cannot really do anything with it. You try to go hold down, you get penned in the turret because the turret is just too weak for even standard ammo. You try to side scrape, people can pen the skirts. And if you over angle, people can just pen the side armor. If you show your front, then people can pen your upper plate. You will now be able to side scrape effectively because you will be able to over angle enough so the side skirts on the side are not visible if you hide it behind a wall. And your cupola can also be hidden. However, your lower plate will be weaker, so people can still easily pen you, and the side skirts are still weak spot. And the engine deck is also overmatchable still, so if he tries to face hug you, you can just pen that. So that's what I do with the Varyag. The Walküre. Oh boy, the Walküre. Ay, this thing needs a complete rework. It's just so bad right now. Now, where should I start? Buff the mobility. But after that, give the dynamics engine rocket boosters. This thing. So, you can use rocket boosters to accelerate quickly, just like the Chinese heavy tanks. And you might ask, but this tank already has a turbocharger. Why would you add another one? Well, the rocket boosters works very differently from the turbocharger. Yes, both of them increase your engine power and top speed, but the rockets increased your engine power way more than the turbocharger in exchange for slightly less top speed. So you have 40 top speed with the Dynamics engine. Activate rocket boosters, you get 4000 engine power. Let's say 4000 engine power, but you only get 60 top speed. With this turbocharger right now, you will get 3000 horsepower with 80 top speed. So this should allow you, even if you use full armor setup, to accelerate to your top speed very quickly, which is what I want, because that means if somebody is in front of you, you can just use the rockets and ram it, and they have no time to react. Now I would also rework the turbocharger to the Juggernaut ability from Onslaught. This means that you will take less damage, but it will also increase your engine power and top speed by a small amount, not as much as the turbocharger. It also makes your tracks invulnerable, so only explosions can damage it. For example, minefield, airstrike, or HE shells, and nothing else. If they shoot AP or APCR at your tracks, nothing is going to happen, which is good because this tank can easily be countered by just one shot at the tracks, which is very annoying. So you can use this ability in conjunction with the rocket boosters, and you will be unstoppable. I would also change the alpha damage guns so that they will do much more alpha. Like, for example, this, instead of 720, this is a 720 on EU, they will do 750. However, they will get noticeably less DPM, not too much less DPM, On EU it has like 3700. Now with the new alpha 750 it will have 3500. Same for this. Less DPM than the reload speed. However, it will have more alpha. For like 480, for example. 480. And this gun should have around 520-ish. This gun doesn't really need to be changed because it's pretty balanced. It's a good gun. I would also buff the loading speeds, penetration slightly, shell velocity, and dispersion, but nothing major, and maybe the aim time. So that's about it for the Valkyr. Let's move on with the Harbinger. Now this tank has a few problems, or should I say a lot of balancing problems. The first one is tier 4. These two guns on the U have the same exact DPM. However, this gun has no clip. So why on earth would you choose this gun if this gun has the same DPM with a 3-shot auto reloader? I would buff the DPM of this, not too much, maybe to about 4000, which might sound like a lot, but remember this is Harbinger. It should have a lot of DPM. This gun has 5500, so like 4000 compared to that isn't that much. I would also give it even more dispersion at 100 meters and better dispersion factors and better shell velocity. This is a trend you will see me doing to most reload speed guns that are not very good or not very used. And more penetration as well compared to this gun. But the tier 7 is not much better in terms of balancing. The alpha damage gun is just kinda useless. I would buff the alpha damage to around 480 and give it like 4800 DPM-ish. I have no problems with the loading speed gun. It should have the most DPM, 5500. This is Lesta stats, that's why it says 5000 DPM. It's actually 5500 on EU. And my main problem is with the tier 7 auto reloader. It has 4 shells in the clip with 5200 DPM and 390 alpha. That's too much. So instead of just nerfing it to the ground like Lesta did by giving it more burst damage, I don't want to give it more burst damage because Harbinger is supposed to have good DPM. So instead, I would make the auto reloader like the Lion in random battles. So the second shell in the clip actually reloads the fastest. And the first one reloads the slowest. So for example, you shoot the first shell. If you only shoot the first shell, you get maybe around 4000 to 3800 DPM, which is basically the same as this, but with higher alpha. However, if you're smart, you don't shoot the final shot, you only shoot the second shot. Then you get 4800. It should still be less than 5200 because that's just way too much. It basically negates the point of this loading speed gun because it just gets same DPM basically with a huge clip. Now, this actually makes a lot of sense because the Raven also has a 4-shot autoloader with around 4300 DPM with way better burst damage, and the Huragan also gets a auto reloader with 7 shots and way better burst damage than the Harbinger with way less DPM. So I want to balance magazine reloading guns to burst damage compared to DPM. High burst damage, lower DPM. Higher DPM, lower burst damage. So Harbinger has a 3-second intro clip, which is not very fast, let's be real, for the auto reloader. So it should have better DPM than the other guns. The corrosive mist. I almost forgot about it. Yeah, this ability also needs a complete rework. It's completely useless in 90% of the scenarios. The only good way to use it is if a guy is sitting in a strong position and you want him to come out, or else he will take huge damage, because this thing actually deals a very good amount of damage, but it just deals that damage in a really long time. So I would remove the damage completely. No damage to nothing. No damage to you, no damage to enemies. However, enemies lose like 10% of their crew effectiveness if they are inside it. And you and your allies, aka your platoon mate, will get 10% bonus to like basically a ventilation that boosts your tanks by 10%. View range penalty should be removed. So you will have max view range even if you're inside the smoke, and you're fully concealed if you're inside the smoke. So, you place the smoke on top of you, and you're invisible to the enemies while you can still see the enemies. I think this could actually be a very useful ability, very strong in certain situations. For example, you are in hold down position and you just hide yourself with the ability, and now the enemy cannot see you. They have to come close, or they will take a lot of damage from your other abilities and from your big DPM. This also synergizes really well because this tank has a lot of DPM, and you can do a lot of damage in just 20 seconds while this ability lasts. So I think this could be a perfect rework. I think they just overcomplicated the ability. Like, they tried to make the smoke screen do damage in Steel Hunter, but they just made it way worse because it deals damage to you, which makes it very useless in most scenarios. I think this will be a much needed rework for this tank. That's all I would do to the Harbinger. Let's move on to the Beowulf. Now, people say the Beowulf is garbage, and it should need a buff. I disagree. Beowulf is a really, really, really good tank. It's just really hard to play. I would nerf the top speed engine to a 50 top speed, because 53 is just too much. 50 is enough. Dynamics shouldn't change. Maybe it even can go up to 45 because it's not really useful. And I should also nerf the engine powers to 1000 instead of 1170. So top speed engine shouldn't be the preferred choice, at least if you use one of these, like armor setup. So yeah, I would nerf the mobility because that's just 53 is just way too much. Now tier 4, I would probably buff this gun a bit. Not DPM, but dispersion and dispersion factors. The gun handling. I would buff the gun handling by a lot. You can fire mostly on the move. Like, you don't have to stand still for 3 seconds or 4 seconds just to hit your shots. I wouldn't change this gun. This gun is pretty balanced, I think. But I would buff the dispersion factors for this gun. Although this gun is also pretty good. People use both of these guns. I think it's pretty good. Pretty well balanced. At least way better than the Harbinger. I would buff the HP that the armor gives, and nerf the HP that the hit points give. I would, instead of 700, well, I don't know what is it on EU. I think it's 600, but I don't know. I'm not sure. It will now give you 50 less HP. So if you use hit point setup, you will get 100 less HP than before. So no, it has 2700. And with the nerf, it now has 2600, which is the same as the Valkyrs with full HP. I think it should be even less, but considering that it has a ability that relies on HP, I don't think we need to nerf it that much. And I would also nerf the armor, so it will give you 100 more HP. Instead of 2000 with full armor setup, you will now have 2200, which is a nice buff. The armor isn't that good. I mean, the Kranwagen turret I sometimes use because it's a Kranwagen turret, but it's not that strong. That it's not impenetrable at all. It's actually pretty balanced. It has good armor, but not too strong. Like, Valkyr has better turret armor than Beowulf. But the main things is the guns. I would change this gun into a gun that's more like the Minotauro. 6 seconds between shots for 580 damage and 14-second reload. So it's very similar to the Lesta version. So it will have the best DPM, but it will have the worst burst damage. This gun shouldn't be changed. This gun is, like, pretty good. I don't think it needs any changes. It's a very strong gun. However, this gun needs a change. This gun is extremely bad. I would buff the gun handling by, like, I don't know, just make the gun very accurate on the move. Right now, it's so inaccurate. Like, you cannot hit shit if you move. That should be changed. The gun handling needs to be buffed, because I think these two guns have the same gun handling. That shouldn't be the case. I would also give it 10 millimeters more penetration, more dispersion at 100 meters, better aim time, and faster shell velocity. But no DPM buff. No DPM buff. We don't need more DPM for heavy tanks. That's never a good thing, because then it's just gonna be broken. But it will make the gun much nicer to play with. If if you're sick of these terrible gun handling guns, you can just choose this gun, and you will hit your shots. That's it about Beowulf. I don't think these abilities need to change, except the adaptive armor. So, basically, right now, every damage you take in the 7 seconds is going to be healed back. And I think that's a balanced mechanic. I think this is a good mechanic. However, what I don't think is good that if you activate the ability from basically full HP and you die before the ability ends, that shouldn't be the case. I'm gonna take both. Oh my god, what? No, 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 no. Please, please, no! I literally could have healed everything back. No. It was... Oh my god, they killed me. Oh. So, you activated your ability at full HP, and two Arlequins just decide to put everything on you. Literally everything. Airstrike, fireball, double, everything. You just die before the ability ends. Now, with this, you stay on 1 HP but until the ability ends, and you heal back everything. This will reward the Beowulf player for using the ability as it's supposed to, and not get absolutely shit on. And the Arlequins will still get damage, but they cannot kill you, so you will stay on 1 HP until the ability ends, and you will heal back. When you use the ability, at least you shouldn't be able to die if you activate the ability when you have at least 80% of your HP. This is mainly a problem in platoon games. It's not really a problem in solo, but it's a nice change, I think. So let's move on to the Bái Láng. Now, abilities are fine. My only problem with the Bái Láng is these two guns here. HE shell damage and loading speed gun. Now, loading speed gun has 4300 DPM, which is the exact same as this gun. So again, why would you choose the loading speed gun if you can just shoot the magazine reloading with way better burst damage? I would buff the DPM to around 4500. I will buff the penetration, dispersion, and shell velocity, pretty standard. So basically my idea is to change stats that alone don't affect the gameplay that much, but if we change all of them, it will just make the gun more nicer to play. And I want to avoid over buffing the DPM because that's just too strong. We don't want to over buff the DPM to absurd levels. And for the HE guns, I would nerf the AP shell to 550 damage. However, I would buff the HE shell to have 80 millimeters of penetration instead of 45, because 45 is useless, let's be real. And if still nobody is using the HEs, we could buff it to 100 millimeters. If even with 100 millimeters of pen, nobody is using the HE shell, I would revert it back to 80 and make it pen spaced armor. So basically, I would give it the new HE mechanic. And of course, people with my new system can now choose intuition, so they can choose HE for the squishy targets, and they could choose AP for more armored targets. 550 AP could be a kinda bad, so maybe I could buff the reload speed to compensate for the loss of DPM. So with HE you will get even more DPM, with AP you will get the same DPM with less alpha. This gun, I don't really think this gun needs a change. It has 4 bursts, and it does like 1200 damage every like 12 seconds, so that's nice. I would also buff the gun depression a bit. Not by too much because it's a Chinese tank, but just a bit. And yeah, that's it basically. Let's move on with the Raven. Buff the reloading speed gun, giving it more pen, faster shell velocity, better dispersion factors. Just make the gun more comfortable to play with, because this gun just overshadows it. I would also nerf this gun's DPM. Now, whole turret. Maybe we could make the rotation speed turret faster reload with the magazine reloading, so people are more encouraged to use the rotation speed turret. And we could also nerf the rotation speed turret's armor, so it will be very easy to pen. Basically, you will sacrifice armor for better DPM. This is also kind of done on Lesta, but they've done it in reverse, which doesn't make sense. This turret has less DPM with this gun, and this turret has more, which I don't agree with. This should be the opposite. So maybe if you choose this rotation speed turret, you will also get better intro clip reload, for example. Instead of 1.75, you will get 1.5. However, you will sacrifice turret armor, so you can get penned in cooldown. So this will be a good choice for good players that know how to play the game, and reward them by choosing the correct upgrades, and also give turret upgrades a purpose, because right now the only purpose of them is just to choose the guns after them. Loading speed, I would buff the loading speeds, dispersion, shell velocity, penetration, alpha damage gun, DPM should also be improved, not as much as the loading speed, maybe to 4800. Of course, this gun will have much worse dispersion factors, dispersion at 100 meters, the penetration, shell velocity compared to this gun in exchange for better alpha. So that's basically it. I don't want to change the Raven too much because I want this tank to be a simple tank to use. Abilities should be easy to use. Should be like the beginner tank, basically, that people can try out if they never tried Steel Hunter before and play. Let's move on with the Arlequin. Now, this tank right now is very broken. What would I change to make it slightly less broken? Rework the double gun. So, what's the broken thing about this tank? Well, the double gun. Double gun is just too good. It gets 1 second charge time, which is just way too good. I would change this gun to have a 3-second charge time. And now you might say, oh, whoa, 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 okay, bro, what? That's just a straight up nerf. Well, in exchange for that, I would give it the S-Fax mechanic, but even better. So if you start doubling, your dispersion at 100 meters goes to 0.01. You will be perfectly accurate if you double. You can hit the pixel shot of the pixel shot with the double gun. Sounds kind of fun. And we also don't have to buff the DPM to compensate for the charge time, because it will have a different gimmick. Instead of 1 second charge time, it will have a very, very accurate double. Now, this will also separate it from the Varyag's double gun, which will have insanely bad accuracy compared to it when doubling. 0.8 accuracy when doubling. So it will have better DPM, better alpha. The Arlequin will have literally perfect accuracy with good gun handling. This is what I would change. Maybe I could also give it like a 1 second lock, because right now it has 0. But in exchange for that, I could buff the single shooter DPM. So maybe buff the DPM, let's say, to around 3700 in exchange for 3-second charge time and 1 second lock. So if you fire a single shooter, you will not get insane accuracy, but you will get slightly better DPM, which is nice. But if you double, you will get insane accuracy, but a very long charge. And I think this could work, although it would significantly change the playstyle of this tank. And I know for a fact that a lot of people won't like this change. If it's like so bad, like if this extra mechanic doesn't work on this tank, then we can just scrap it, revert it back, and try a different approach. HE gun, I would just make the standard HE the new HE mechanic instead of the old one. With the old HE, you always like try to aim. If you use the old HE mechanic, you always try to aim. Or if you don't, then you just splash people. Well, the new HE mechanic basically means that you will not be able to auto-aim as much, because you will just get the screen not penetrated message all the time with the new HE, because every tank has spaced armor. However, if you try to aim, you don't actually have to avoid spaced armor that much, because the new HE actually pens spaced armor. And I would also make the penning spaced armor much easier with the standard HE. So if you aim carefully, you don't get fucked up by spaced armor. However, if you just want to splash people and just auto-aim them and just drive around, you can use the gold HE with the old HE mechanic. I don't think this gun needs another change. It has pretty balanced stats, I think. It's very hard to play, of course, but I think it's right now in a good position. Tier 4 can actually keep the 1 second charge time for the double. With better DPM. Maybe buff the penetration of the magazine reloading to be the exact same as the double gun, because the penetration on the magazine reloading is kinda bad. Actually, the abilities, we need to improve the AI for the fireball somehow. I don't know how the AI works, but it's just sometimes chases enemies like crazy, and other times it cannot explode on the enemy that's literally next to it that's not moving. So that's about it for the Arlequin. Let's move on to the Huragan. The Huragan is also mostly a balanced tank, but of course reload speed guns are here for basically no reason. I have two ideas. First, buff dispersion, shell velocity, penetration, dispersion factors, just the average, and maybe the DPM. Yeah, the DPM also needs a nerf because Huragan's these guns here are really good. However, I have a better solution. Make these guns have the stray shells, aka the Bliskavica mechanic or the Polish TD moves. So, the closer you are to the enemy, the more damage you do. This is not going to be APFSDS. This is going to be stray shells. And the gold ammo should be a normal AP shell that does slightly less damage than the stray shell, but it does the same damage on every distance. You can use stray shells at close range to maximize your DPM, or you can use AP shells at long range. So the damage drop-off should be significant. For example, this gun should have 300 alpha, like with the stray shells. You will have like 300 alpha at 50 meters. That means you will have around 4,800 DPM at 50 meters, which is very good. However, with the AP, you will have 190 at every range. Maybe this could be an APCR, as we don't even have to change it to AP. This could be an APCR that does the same damage everywhere. You will have 3,000 DPM with APCR. Same for this gun. You will have 365 alpha. With the stray shells, it now has 400. The reload speed gun at tier 7 with the stray shells now has 400 alpha per shot. That means it has 5,200 DPM, which is not as good as the Harbinger, but very good. However, APCR, the gold shell, will have only 3,700 DPM, but it does the same damage everywhere. So it does the same damage to a tank that's 50 meters away and the same damage at 500 meters away. I think this could work. However, we have to make the abilities synergize more. If you use the stray shell mechanic, you will have the same damage everywhere. So the damage drop-off is removed when you use this ability. If you use this gun and there is a guy 500 meters away, you can just use the stray shells with like 2000 shell velocity and just melt them with this ability. So it won't be useless like right now with the reload speed guns. So now you have a reason to choose loading speed guns. And I would also buff this gun slightly. It will have more DPM with a 3-second intro clip instead of 2.5. So it will still have 5 shells, but reload time should be less, like 10 seconds, just like this gun. But the unload time will take longer. So it will be more different from this gun. That means it will take 12 seconds to unload your clip for only 10-second reload, which means you do 1700 every 22 seconds. That means your DPM goes up to 4600, which is marginally better than this gun. However, this gun will still retain the excellent 1.5 second intro clip with 7 shots and more shells in the clip. So that's what would I do for this tank. And I think we are actually done. I shared my thoughts for every single tank, and now let's move on to the new tanks. The first new tank is a Czech light tank. Now, how would I imagine this tank? It's gonna be based around the autocannons, because autocannons are just so good. It's such a good mechanic. Wargaming wasted autocannons on the Tessak because like they made the light tanks. They buffed them in 2.0, but they are still light tanks, so they get the light tank matchmaking, which is the main problem. Whatever, we're not talking about Tessak right now. We need autocannons. Then I have fully detailed stats for these guns. The tier 4 autocannon, 3100 DPM, that's below average. I would say that's below average. 10 damage. I think penetration should be less. Maybe 170. Yeah, 170 penetration should be good enough. I imagined it having 775 clip size with 750 damage. 4.5 seconds to unload the clip. It has pretty good dispersion factors, bad dispersion at 100 meters as all Steel Hunter tanks have. So yeah, it's gonna be a nice tier 4 gun. Nothing crazy. It will have a slightly worse clip damage than Huragan and Raven, but more damage than Arlequin. However, remember this is autocannon, so you need to hit all your shots to get 750. But this won't be the end of this, because you will have access to HE shells with double the DPM. Yes, Yes, 70 penetration. This is gonna be the main gimmick of autocannons in Steel Hunter. They just get doubled DPM. And they already have insane DPM. Like, look at this is a tier 4 gun. And it has 6,200 DPM. Oh, yeah. You put intuition on these tanks and every right tank is just dead. Like 1,500 damage every 10 seconds. It's just crazy for a tier 4 gun. Remember, this is a tier 4 gun. You just auto aim on an Arlequin and he's dead. Like, even if it has the hit points all, if you manage to pen his turret, he's dead. Let's look at the other gun, magazine reloading. This is a more boring version. It's basically, I just borrowed it from the TVP's tier 9, basically. So it's not going to be that insane. Penetration is going to be 145. Reload speed is going to be a bit longer, but it will do more damage per clip, and it will also only have 3 clip size. This gun will be more effective at longer ranges with a nice 1.8 second intro clip, better dispersion than the autocannon. Let's move on to the tier 7 autocannon. This is gonna be the peak of this tank, 4,500 DPM. 10-second reload time stays the same, however the damage goes up by a lot. It will have 192 penetration, same dispersion factors as tier 4 guns, however this is not even the craziest part. 9,000 DPM. Imagine if you pen enemy heavy tank with all of your shots. 2,400. 2,400 damage. Yeah, this gun will probably need a nerf if we introduce it like this, but I think we should introduce, if we want to make this gun interesting, we need to make it broken. Or at least strong. This is going to be pretty strong, not gonna lie. This is like just 9,000 DPM. It's just so strong. So yeah, I think this could be a fun gun to use. And tier 7 magazine reloading, 4,100 DPM, 520 damage with better penetration than the autocannons. 1.5 second intro clip for 1,040 damage. So basically the VZ55's gun, but even better. With way more DPM. It won't be as crazy as the other gun. Remember, this gun will have APFSDS as a gold ammo, not HE. So only the autocannons will have HE as standard. Every other gun in this tank will have APFSDS. So you can actually do way more, like maybe 1,500 in 1.5 seconds if you manage to find a large enemy. I would say these are kind of fun upgrades. It's very similar to the Arlequin because it's a light tank. It will have mobility and hit points. Hit points will have the big autoloader, the VZ55's autoloader. The mobility will have the autocannon. I imagined it having like insane gun, 14 degrees of gun depression, maybe. Just like the Tessak. So it will have the best gun depression in Steel Hunter. Even the Beowulf only has 8 degrees, which with the Kranwagen turret, which is pretty bad, considering the Kranwagen has 12 in random battles. Now, the reload speed gun, I don't really know what should be. We could make another gun, maybe the TVP's gun, instead of the reload speed gun. However, we could make ability for this tank, which will basically add the overheating mechanic. So you fire for too long and your gun is going to overheat and you have to wait for a long time. Now, every specific stat is here on the screen. If you don't want to overheat, you stop shooting and then the gun cools down and you can shoot again. I think this could be a nice mechanic for this tank. I don't know what should be the first ability. I thought of ability that increases your module damage, but I'm not sure. That might be just way too good because like autocannons, like you have 100 shells and every shell gets increased module damage. Yeah, you would just knock out everything, engine, turret, whatever, even ammo rack. So yeah, that's my idea of the Czech light tank in Steel Hunter. Now let's move on to the Italian tank. And Italian heavy tank. However, this is more of a medium heavy tank. depending on what you choose. First, the Dynamics engine should have 38 top speed. Let's settle with 38 top speed. I didn't actually think of this earlier, but let's settle with 38 top speed. That's slightly better than the Valkyr, but slightly worse than the Varyag. However, as you can see, you will get insane frontal armor. Like, only the cupola and these small cheeks are pennable. I mean, everything that's red becomes green when you shoot gold. The tank will have a pretty bad side armor, which is very unusual for a heavy tank in Steel Hunter. You will have insane frontal armor, but only on flat ground. As you can see, if you use your gun depression, the armor doesn't really work anymore. It falls apart. Lower plate is also pennable, and if you try to side scrape, you will get penned. You might say, like, this is kind of a boring. If we look at other Steel Hunter tanks, you will see quite the opposite. Every Steel Hunter tank has very good side armor with pretty bad frontal armor. For the hull, at least, not the turret, for the hull. Now I want to change that with this tank, so it will be a unique gameplay. And the hit points, which shouldn't give you that much more hit points, will be much lighter, and you will be able to equip the top speed engine, which will be just strong enough for you to reach your top speed somewhat reliably, not by too much, but maybe your top speed should be 55, which is very good for a heavy tank. However, you will lose basically all of your armor. Only in hull down, you will have a gun mantlet that's pretty hard to pen and auto ricochet angles. But you will also have ears, and next to the gun mantlet should be also pennable. So if you're far away from the enemy and you're in hull down, they might have a hard time to pen. Now, talk about the gun upgrades for this tank. The armor setup should lead to a gun that's very similar to the Minotauro's gun. 6 second, 4 second, I think 6 second intro clip is good enough, with 5 shells in the clip, with, I don't know, 520 alpha, and with a decent DPM of 4500 to 4800 DPM. For the second gun, I imagined a Rhinocerontes gun, maybe on the hit points, but it doesn't really matter, just the guns. We could change where the gun is located at, so if we want the Rhinocerontes gun on the hit points, on the armor, we can also do that, but I think it makes more sense because the Rhinocerontes gun will have a slightly less alpha, maybe 490, but it will have maybe a 3 to 4 second intro clip, and it will have the improved auto reloader mechanic, improved even more. If you don't know what that means, it basically, if you fire your shot earlier, just before you reload, you get a reload bonus for the next shell that is loading. However, I want to make this crazy good, at least as good as it can be. So if you fire 1 or 2 seconds before your shell loads, you will your next shell will reload as fast as your intro clip, which means that, for example, you have 1 shell and the second shell needs only 2 seconds to load. You can shoot your first shell, and the second shell will be loaded when your intro clip ends, which means that you actually don't have to wait for the shells to fully get into your magazine, and you can fire earlier, and you will not get any penalty for it. This is probably going to be a pretty niche mechanic still. However, this is as much as I can buff it. I literally cannot make this mechanic better, because like this mechanic is kind of useless anyway. However, we can see it here in the Italian tank. Maybe it could work, maybe it doesn't. We can try it. So let's move on to my final tank, and I won't be discussing Japanese tanks much. I would say that a gun cooling with insane accuracy, like maybe 0.1, but you have to sacrifice DPM for it, could be added for the Japanese tank in Steel Hunter, but I don't really have much else. I don't even know if it's going to be a medium or heavy or whatever. I was thinking about adding the Type 5 as hit points or armor, but I don't know. But yeah, the gun cooling, if you add a Japanese tank, we should also add a gun cooling mechanic. what I wanted to talk about is the final tank that I want to add in Steel Hunter is a wheeled tank, probably a French tank. Another French tank. A wheeled tank that goes 110 kilometers per hour with the top speed engine, and 70 in the cruise mode. AKA, this tank will have the EBR's mechanic. You can switch modes. The Dynamics engine will have 80 top speed with no modes, like the VCS 6x6. So you don't have to switch modes, you will always go 80 with better engine power, obviously. And I also want to add a special gimmick. Not gonna take any fall damage. You jump off a huge cliff, you take no damage. This might sound overpowered, however, this tank will have pretty bad DPM. Basically, it will have maybe a shitty autoloader, maybe a 2-shot autoloader, and a single shooter. Both of them should have a bad DPM. The single shooter at tier 4 maybe 3000 and the autoloader should have like 2800 at tier 4. This is tier 4. A tier 1 gun should be just a single shooter. It will be kind of crappy in the beginning. However, once you upgrade to the engine, it will become really fast. And the tier 7 guns, also 2-shot autoloader, just like the EBR-75. One single shooter, like the EBR-105, and something else, maybe? I don't know. They should have HE as premium shells, with very good penetration. So your DPM actually becomes somewhat good. Not too good like the autocannons. Like, it will be competitive. Like, for example, the tier 7 gun, tier 7 single shooter will have 3500 DPM. With the HE it will have 4200 maybe. So they won't have good DPMs. They won't have very good firepower. Of course, they will have insane gun handling. Their main gimmick is gonna be speed and stealth, because the abilities. The first ability is basically just the Borkenkäfer's ability. It's gonna mark tanks. If you shoot them, if you hit them, you don't have to pen. If you hit them, they will take more damage. They will be spotted for longer, for 10 seconds. It will last for like maybe 15 seconds. However, this won't be a permanent use, so you cannot use it every 30 seconds. You will get abilities just like any other tank, and you can actually run out of it. And the second ability will make your stationary and moving concealment to 100%. Which means that you cannot get spotted unless you shoot or you are 50 meters or closer to an enemy. And you will only be spotted for 3 seconds, because Steel Hunter you only get spotted for 3 seconds. So this tank will rely on surprise attacks and not much about its gun, but rather outmaneuvering the enemy and just... And I've just added the special gimmick so you won't crash every 2 seconds. And you can actually use this special gimmick to your advantage, because you can jump off a cliff while knowing that you will survive every time. So, and the enemy cannot really go after you. And you can, like, for example, someone chases you, maybe an Arlequin with also good mobility, and you just jump off the bridge and go below the bridge. Now the Arlequin has to choose to go down the bridge safely, which takes quite a bit of time, and that should give you enough time to run away. Or he could choose to risk it and jump off and die, which will be pretty good. So like this, I imagine this tank to be extremely fast, extremely stealthy. It should still have pretty good base view range and base camo, which, you know, it doesn't really make sense for Steel Hunter, but like, I think this could be a fun tank. Like, it doesn't have to have insane firepower, insanely strong abilities. It's just the fact that you can outmaneuver enemies so easily. However, before you start ramming things, this tank will still take full ramming damage, so you shouldn't ram tanks at all. Because of course it will weigh nothing, and even Arlequin can ram it. So yeah, it will still take ramming damage, but it will be very annoying to hit, very annoying to find. If he uses the ability, you will just have no idea where it is it? and you will just get spotted. And of course, this ability will also make you invisible to radios. So for 20 seconds, if you use radio, you won't get spotted. And if someone else uses radio, won't see you. However, you can still use your radio and you won't get spotted for the enemies. That's everything. Every new tank, everything that I want to add / change to the EU server version of Steel Hunter. However, I want to talk a little bit about Lesta's version of Steel Hunter, where the game mode is a permanent game mode. They also have interesting mechanics that are exclusive to Lesta. The first one is flamethrowers. I want to add these mechanics as testing and see if they work. I would replace one of the Raven's gun with the flamethrower gun and see how it performs. I would imagine 2 shells, 1 shell with faster shell velocity, bigger range, but lower damage, and the other one with higher damage but less range and shell velocity. After like a month, we will see how they perform, and if it's fundamentally broken, we can just remove it. It doesn't really fit, because in my opinion, flamethrowers aren't that good, well suited for Steel Hunter. Like, imagine hitting an Arlequin with full mobility build. Your shell velocity is so slow, even if it's like 50 meters away. It's only really going to be good against heavy tanks, but even then, it's not going to do that much damage because you cannot pen heavies. So I don't think flamethrowers are well suited, but I will still give it a try anyway. Another mechanic that could actually be really fun in Steel Hunter is the auto reloader double barrel. Now, you might ask, what? You just made that up, right? There's no way this mechanic exists. Well, you will be wrong. This mechanic actually exists on the Lesta server as a tier 11. The Mauskönig has this mechanic, and basically it works the same way as an auto reloader, but for 2 guns. So the mechanism loads shells into 2 guns instead of 1. If you don't do anything, the mechanism will first load the first shell, then the second, and then starts load the magazine. And then you start firing, and then the mechanism loads the shells from the clip and starts loading more shells in the clips. So like it's a bit confusing, but it could work. Maybe for the Varyag, double and then wait a few seconds and then double again and then wait a few seconds and then double and then you're out of ammo. That could be interesting. And I think that's basically it for Lesta. Wouldn't add other mechanics. But let me know down in the comments if you think other mechanics would be fun in Steel Hunter. Not for just Lesta Steel Hunter, but also for EU server Steel Hunter. Let me know, what do you think about these proposed changes? If you think they are good, if you think they are complete garbage. Thank you so much for watching, and I really appreciated watching the video till the end. However, before you leave, I just want to tell you that we have a Discord server. This is actually a really good opportunity to join our server, because next week Steel Hunter is coming on EU and NA, and it would be a good way to connect every Steel Hunter and finding platoons and discussing. If you're interested, link in the description.